The demonstrations would usually begin on Rasht Street. In those days, all the bazaar shopkeepers were united. All of them, even while they were busy with their day-to-day sales activity, they would take moments to share thoughts with each other on protests. Every day around 1 p.m., the bazaar shopkeepers would close their shops and start the protest. Moalem Street has many alley streets leading into it, and that is how the protesting crowd would shape up every day, by pouring in through these alley streets. Girls and boys would arrive there by cars, tightening their sneakers, tying their scarves over their face, or putting on masks and caps. They were mostly 16 to 18 years of age, and looked as if they were going to war, empty-handed though. We just gave them lots of love and wished them safety. From their faces, it was completely clear what they were going for. Their clothes were consistent, comfortable pants and sneakers, and the same anger and seriousness on their faces. Up to Wednesday, January 7th, Gen Z kids were more present on the streets, though people up to 30 were also in the crowd. In the Masa Amini movement, began September 2022, usually about 100 to 300 people would come out for protests. But in this recent uprising, a few thousand people would come out, and at once. The crowd would get so big quickly that one couldn't see its ends in one glance. I remember that earlier on, in every gathering that I was invited to, everyone had this dilemma of joining or not joining the protests. One would say he had a newborn. One would say they had just gotten married. But then they all wondered who should be then going to protest for their rights. Evidently, their final collective decision was that everyone should get out. In the early days of the protests, as the protests grew, the government quickly gave people ration coupons in the form of funds deposited directly into their bank accounts. It was about 1 million tomans per month, $10. It was not enough to solve any big problem. It could only cover about 4 kilos of fruit. The bitter truth about this coupon was that not only the government failed to provide that fund, the announcement of the coupon caused a sudden inflation as well. I witnessed a man at a shop swipe his bank card, and the transaction was declined. He thought the coupon funds had been deposited, but the shopkeeper told him the funds weren't available to spend yet. So the government either did not truly send the fund, or they had just lied. Additionally, a few weeks earlier, fuel had also doubled in price. All of these instances of financial pressure made people's frustration build. It was Wednesday, 7th January, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that as per the usual protesting routine of those days, the bazaar shopkeepers closed their shops for the protest. I was in the bazaar with my family, walking out to get somewhere a few minutes' drive away, when an old man on the way warned us not to go there due to a large crowd of protesters and tear gas shot by the riot police. Right then, in a strange way, within 5 minutes, the street suddenly filled up with protesting people. As the number of protesters became huge, I was only looking for a taxi to take my family somewhere safe. That day ended with some casualties, but the presence of people on the streets built confidence in them that they can make an impact if they all show up together at once. The first protest that led to severe violence started on Thursday, 8th January, at 8 p.m. All my friends participated in that. They all had their own business, like jewelry shops, grocery stores, butcheries, car dealerships, and so on. The interesting point is that they took their own children along, as young as 9. They deliberately wanted it so that if they were going to be killed, they would die altogether. They were not in desperate financial need, however they were exhausted with the situation. At 8 p.m., the entire central city areas like Takhti Street, Moalem Street, and Shardari Square became highly crowded. People were also out in other parts of the city. I was at Moalem Street, and at the same time I watched the crowd on Golsar Boulevard, which is a bit far from where I was at the time, through the mobile app of a security camera installed at a friend's shop there. Golsar protesters made a long protest that could be seen passing in front of the shop camera. It was hard to guess the numbers, but it conveyed the magnitude of the protest. Perhaps due to this magnitude, The Suppression Forces didn't initially dare to attack, but they had a deliberate strategy. They managed to split the crowd, drive part of it toward the main bazaar, and block every direction out. The rest of the protesters outside of this area returned home by the end of the night. I think it was between midnight and 1 a.m. that they started attacking the protesters trapped in the bazaar. Rasht's main bazaar has different gateways that open onto the surrounding streets. The suppression forces, with heavy weapons like Dushka, Soviet Union-made automatic gun, were stationed at all the exits. People, in fact, had to go inside the bazaar for refuge. The horrible moment started with the forces setting the bazaar on fire. Not only did they intend to force people out to shoot them straight away, but with this act the government also took revenge on the bazaar for starting the protests, burning all the goods that shopkeepers had bought in advance for Nowruz, Persian New Year. With shops on fire, people had two options: stay and burn or rush out. Stun grenades were also thrown into the crowd to heighten the level of fear and terror. Then shooting started from far away with powerful machine guns. At first, due to the gunfire sounded like being distant, the protesters could not tell they were the direct target. But soon they realized when everyone around them started falling. The choice between burning or dying there by bullet forced them to rush outward and face massacre by the armed forces waiting for them with heavy machine guns. After this massacre, the suppression forces fired finishing shots at each wounded alive person. This incident left so many dead that the morgues had no space for the bodies. Many corpses remained on the ground, which also served the regime's goal of inflicting terror and fear into the community. The sad story is, because of the internet shutdown at the time, the cutting of phone calls, and the crowd being broken up throughout the day on Thursday, those who were in other areas of Rasht were mostly unaware of the massacre. Therefore, on Friday 9th of January, as usual, many gathered toward Moalem Street. That day, as I passed through Moalem Street, the banks, mosques, and several alleys were burned down. Despite the look of the city, people's morale was positive. They were showing each other the sign of freedom and victory. People looked triumphantly happy. Cars were honking with joy, as if the victory was a stone's throw away. Some people might have known what had happened the night before, but spirits were high, and they had no idea what was coming. The suppression police started a mass shooting on Friday night from 9 p.m. It was all machine gun firing. They killed anyone they spotted on the streets. The forces had old-model Toyota Hilux vehicles, and all the men were masked and were sitting with machine guns in the back, firing at cars and people. From about 2 or 3 a.m., early Saturday morning, there was a brief lull, but then until 7 a.m., scattered wailing and bursts of gunfire could be heard. On Saturday, a large crowd of families were on their way to Rasht's main cemetery to identify the bodies of their loved ones. There were too many bodies lined up that families had to go through too many corpses to find theirs. Imagine the excessive trauma. While people were looking for their loved ones, forces beat them with batons and shouted at them, "Find the bastard you raised!" Identifying the body of the loved ones was not the end of the story. Families had to pay a bullet fee for each bullet. Bullet fee is the cost of the bullets used to kill a person by the regime. A humiliating act by the regime that always existed throughout the life of this regime. This cost at the time was 300 million tamans, approximately $3,000. They charged Tehranians more by around 1 billion tamans, approximately $10,000. The other option for families was to announce their loved ones as members of Basij, IRGC paramilitary volunteer militia, so that the government could forge a high number of its own members killed supposedly by protesters. Some families could afford paying the fees, so they buried their relatives properly, and those who could not do so left the bodies behind. All of these abandoned corpses were buried in mass graves anonymously. Some people were able to take away their killed relatives before the government collected the bodies and buried them in the same cemetery or another. Apparently, the government later dug up some of these bodies to demand bullet fees. Some also buried the bodies of their relatives secretly in their own backyards. In the Masa Amini movement, A friend of mine took his brother's body off the street and kept in his car until he could get a chance to bury him secretly, to spare himself the humiliation of paying bullet fees. There were other stories I heard and want to share. I heard from trusted friends. A young couple who were active in these protests ran away home from the forces to hide in their garage. The wife stepped out to peek into the street, and as she opened the door, she was fatally shot in the throat at a very close range by an agent standing right behind the door. Another source said he had seen with his own eyes agents break into a garage where about 30 or 40 protesters had taken refuge and kill them all. I'm speaking off the top of my head, yet none of it truly captures the horror the protesters went through. After those nights, the city of Rasht had become like a prison. We had no phone reception, no internet, and they had killed everyone. The city smelled of blood. The city was burned. Spilled blood on the ground was ubiquitous. Almost anyone I came across had lost one of their close ones. It was horrible. I don't think we had such a traumatic disaster even during the Iran-Iraq war. Maybe people in the south of Iran experienced something similar, but even if they did, it was done by foreigners, not by our own government. For a few days after these events, while I was there, all the shops were closed. Schools were open, but no one sent their child to school. It was like the atmosphere during COVID, when nobody was out. A suffocating feeling, heavy grief, as if there was black smoke in this city that would not let anyone breathe. I only wanted to leave the country. I couldn't stand it. Now that I have come out, my state is worse than those days. The Islamic Republic did not let us live a normal life. We experienced a bitter youth, deprived of a normal life. And now that I have migrated out of Iran, I am still suffering from horrible crimes of this regime. It has been days that we haven't heard from our families in Iran. With difficulty, they can call us because the internet is still shut down and only outbound calls are allowed. The government even raised the cost of outbound calls, perhaps to generate more revenue. I only hope the spilled blood of those protesters won't be wasted. Many of them were 16 to 18 years old, who did not truly get to experience the joy of life. Their lives were burdened with poverty, crackdown, and censorship. They neither managed to build a life, nor could see a bright future. And how sad that the final scene of their precious lives was their corpses piled up on the streets.